You stop explaining yourself. Freedom begins the moment you stop apologizing for who you are. They always ask, why did you leave? Why didn't you respond? Why are you like this now? But the untouchable man says nothing. Not out of cruelty, not out of superiority, but because he has understood something. No explanation will ever be enough for those who benefit from your confusion. The shift. There comes a quiet moment in a man's life where he realizes that explaining himself is a cage made of words. Each sentence is a bar, each justification a chain. You speak, and it feels like you're clarifying, but what you're really doing is pleading for understanding, begging for approval, bargaining for a peace that never comes. And then you stop. Not out of defeat, but out of a deeper kind of dignity. You see them puzzled, you see them frustrated, you see them invent stories about who you are, and still you remain silent. Jung's mirror, withdrawing from the collective persona. Carl Jung once said, "A man who does not understand his own shadow will project it onto others forever." When you explain yourself too much, you're not actually being honest. You're just managing perception. You're still in the persona, the mask, the social self who wants to be liked, wanted, validated. But individuation, the real path to becoming whole, requires stepping away from that stage. You do not owe anyone a TED Talk about your silence. You do not need to convert anyone to your path. You simply walk it. The true self walks without applause. Stoic fire. Let them misunderstand. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." The moment you stop explaining, you return to pure action. No commentary, no emotional receipts, no performance. The Stoic does not announce his peace, he lives it. People will project. They'll assume you're arrogant, selfish, broken. But here's the secret. Let them. Let them talk. Let them guess. Let them build entire myths around your silence. Because the man who needs to be understood is still a prisoner of their permission. You are free. The test. They will try to bait you. You've changed. You think you're better than us. Why are you acting like this? These are not questions, they are traps. Your old self would have explained for hours. Your current self simply nods. Because now you know, explaining yourself is a form of submission. And your silence is now your crown. To the viewer, mirror of the untouchable. Ask yourself honestly, why do you explain? To be understood? To not feel alone? To prove you're not the villain? But here's the truth. The people who love you don't need your explanations. And the people who demand explanations will never be satisfied. Every time you explain yourself, you reinforce the idea that you owe them something. You owe them nothing. You owe the truth to your own path and the silence required to walk it. The decision. You could keep justifying your growth, keep watering yourself down for comfort, keep begging to be seen, explained, accepted. Or you can walk into the next chapter with your silence intact. Not because you're cold, but because you're done apologizing for becoming a man they can no longer manipulate. This is your first step toward becoming untouchable. You stop explaining. You start becoming. They'll call it mysterious. They'll call it ego. They'll call it whatever helps them sleep. But deep down, they'll feel it. The shift, the detachment, the fire they no longer control. And maybe now you're wondering, who is this man that no longer explains, no longer flinches, this untouchable man? Let me show you.
When you become untouchable.
And no one knows the cost but you. There comes a time not in noise, not in applause, but in the echo of your own silence, when something inside you no longer bends. It doesn't announce itself, it doesn't scream, it simply no longer needs permission to exist. You become untouchable, not when you're feared, but when you're no longer moved by fear. You become untouchable not when you win, but when you no longer need to win to be at peace. You become untouchable the moment you stop waiting for someone to understand you, and you understand yourself so deeply that misunderstanding becomes irrelevant. When does it happen? It happens after betrayal, when you bury your illusions beside your trust. It happens after loss, when your identity shatters and you stop rebuilding for them and start rebuilding for you. It happens when you are left with silence and you don't run from it. You sit in it, and something ancient inside you rises. But what does it cost? It costs your need to be liked. It costs your fear of loneliness. It costs your addiction to validation. It costs your ego, the one that flinched every time someone didn't clap. It costs your need to be seen, because now you see yourself. And when you see yourself truly, no praise can inflate you, no insult can puncture you, no silence can haunt you, because the throne you sit on now is built from every moment you chose not to betray yourself. Becoming untouchable is not becoming numb, it's becoming anchored. It's not apathy, it's clarity. You still feel, you still love, but now you choose what enters your soul. And you protect it like a citadel, not out of fear, but out of honor. Final words. They won't know when it happened. They won't see the fire it took. They'll just say, he's different now, quieter, but somehow stronger. And you'll say nothing. Because the untouchable man doesn't explain himself. He embodies himself. And now, the next chain will be even sharper. We explore the second sign of true inner power. The man who cannot be flattered cannot be broken. Chain 2. You are immune to praise or hate. The man who cannot be flattered cannot be broken. They call him cold. They say he's unfeeling. They whisper he's lost something. His warmth, his openness, his spark. But they don't understand what it means to stop being controlled. Because this man, he's no longer swayed by compliments. He doesn't shift when they praise him, and he doesn't crumble when they insult him. He has stepped out of reach, emotionally sovereign, immune to both applause and attack. And that makes him untouchable, in a way they can't explain and will never control. The illusion of praise. Praise is not just words, it's bait. It's the soft side of manipulation, the velvet glove of expectation. They tell you you're brilliant so you'll perform. They call you kind so you won't say no. They compliment your strength so they can later demand more from it. But here's the truth. Most praise is not about you. It's about them, their projections, their needs, their attempt to shape you into something useful for them. Carl Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." And that includes projecting their unlived lives onto you, calling you amazing so they don't have to become it themselves. Praise becomes a mirror of their fantasy. And if you believe it, you become a prisoner of their reflection. The trap of flattery. There's a reason emperors had a slave whisper, "Remember you are mortal," into their ear during triumphs. Because even the greatest fall if they begin to believe their own myth. And every time you let praise feed your ego, you trade your stability for a sugar high. You become inflated, and inflated things are fragile. What they praise you for today, they will crucify you for tomorrow. The world will say, "He's a genius," until you speak against their comfort. Then suddenly, "He's arrogant, dangerous, out of touch." This is the cycle. Praise raises the stage, hate brings the knives. The Stoics knew this. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Why? Because freedom lives where public opinion dies. And a man who doesn't need to be praised is a man who cannot be blackmailed by rejection. Hate is just praise turned inside out. You think you fear hatred, but what you really fear is losing approval. Because hate is not the opposite of love. Hate is a reaction, a desperate scream for control when admiration fails. If they can't praise you into submission, they'll try to shame you into obedience. But here's the secret. When you stop being moved by praise, you stop being wounded by hate. You become still. Still like a mountain. Still like a blade before it strikes. Still like the man who no longer needs the world to reflect his worth. He reflects it for himself, internally, quietly, invisibly, and no one can take that from him. Jung's warning, the inflated man falls. Carl Jung warned that inflation, the false enlargement of self through projection, is one of the most dangerous states a man can live in. You think you're powerful because they clap? You think you're good because they smile? You think you're worthy because they nod? Then what happens when they turn? When the crowd leaves? When the silence comes? If your worth depends on external feedback, you have built your kingdom on sand. You will live on your knees, begging for likes, approval, validation. And that is not masculinity, that is slavery. The mature man detaches. He accepts praise, but he doesn't eat it. He hears criticism, but he doesn't swallow it. He remains untouched. He listens, but does not kneel. Stoic practice, the armor of indifference. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Indifference, not as apathy, but as clarity. It means you care about the right things, about your values, your integrity, your silence, not the noise of approval or attack. When you practice this indifference, praise cannot make you arrogant, hate cannot make you bitter, criticism cannot break you, silence cannot frighten you. You are no longer running on the emotional leash of others. You are pacing your own breath, your own mission. That is the core of masculine stability, to be grounded not in applause, but in alignment. The mirror breaks. Now, watch what happens. They praise you. You smile, but don't flinch. They insult you. You stay still, but don't explain. They expect reaction. They get silence. And suddenly, you become terrifying. Why? Because the man who doesn't need praise cannot be controlled by threat. You have exited the emotional game board. You're playing something else, something internal. This is what they fear, not your rage, not your power, but your stillness. Your indifference to the things they once used to chain you. You have become sovereign, not over the world, but over your own reactivity. That is where real power lives. The untouchable man, revealed. Who is he? He is the man who walks through a storm of opinions and never raises his shield, because he has no need to defend what is already whole. He lets them cheer, he lets them boo. He keeps walking. And when they ask, "Don't you care what people think?" he answers, "Why would I?" They call him arrogant, but they don't see his discipline. They don't see the years it took to bury his craving for approval, to starve his hunger for applause, to build the inner citadel where his self-worth now lives, undisturbed. And that is why they will never touch him again. Now, you've seen the man who no longer explains, You've seen the man who can't be swayed by fame or insult. But there is one more layer. The man who moves without permission. He does not ask. He acts. And the world makes room for him. Stay with us, because in Chain 3, we will enter the realm of pure masculine action. When you no longer wait for approval, you become unstoppable. This is the path of pure masculine action. The man who acts without waiting, without explaining, without needing permission. Chain 3. You move without permission. He doesn't ask. He doesn't announce. He moves, and the world adjusts. They used to tell you, wait your turn, don't be too much, make sure everyone's okay with it first. And you did. You waited. You asked. You softened your words. You made sure they were comfortable before you spoke truth. But then one day, something broke. A silence cracked through your chest, and you realized no one is coming to give you permission. And the men you admire never waited. The myth of approval. You were trained to ask. Before you made a move, before you changed direction, before you claimed space, you looked for a nod, a green light, a smile that said, go ahead, it's okay now. But what if no one gives it? What if the world never says, you're ready? What if the gate never opens? Most men die in that waiting room, waiting for the world to validate their power, waiting for the crowd to crown them, waiting for life to feel safe enough to live. But the initiated man, the man reborn in silence and shadow, he knows. The world does not grant permission. You must take it. Jung's fire, acting without shadow. Carl Jung said, a man who has not passed through the inferno of his passions has never overcome them. Meaning, you cannot move like a king if you're still waiting like a boy. The boy waits to be seen. The man sees, and then moves. When you carry unresolved wounds, your actions are always permission-seeking. Your voice is soft, not from kindness, but fear. You delay not from strategy, but doubt. You ask not out of respect, but because you don't trust your own authority. But when you face the inferno, the ego burn, the collapse and rebuild, you stop asking, you start embodying. You no longer need validation to move. You move. Because you've seen yourself. And now, no one else's eyes are needed. The Stoic way. Will approval. Seneca wrote, if a man knows not to which port he sails, no wind is favorable. When you know where you're going, you don't stop to explain. You don't wait for consensus. You don't ask who approves. You sail into it. Because a man who lives by permission is never free. He will not build what must be built. He will not say what must be said. He will not do what must be done. And here's the truth. The world respects movement, not permission. It adjusts to the man who moves first. It obeys the man who acts, not the one who asks. The crowd waits. The king moves. The masculine frame, action as authority. A man in his masculine doesn't speak of power. He speaks from it. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't beg. He doesn't ask the room to confirm he's allowed to be who he already is. He moves, and the room reorganizes itself. You've seen this. A man enters a space with certainty. No arrogance, just still force. And suddenly the air changes. Not because he was loud, but because he carried no apology for his presence. That is movement without permission. That is power in stillness. That is what happens when you stop asking to exist. The death of the good boy. This part will sting. The man who still needs to be liked is not ready to lead. Because leadership is not applause. Leadership is loneliness. It is walking through storms of criticism with your eyes on the summit. The good boy wants to be loved. The man wants to live in truth. You cannot have both. So when you stop asking, is this okay? Do they like me? Will they approve? You're not becoming cruel. You're becoming free. The psychological shift. Moving from outer to inner authority. Most men were trained to obey outer voices. Teachers, bosses, women, society, experts. But few were trained to hear the inner voice, the whisper of instinct, soul, fire. When you start moving without permission, it's not rebellion, it's return. You return to your own compass. You act not to impress, but to express. You move not to dominate, but to liberate the part of you that has waited too long. And yes, some will resist. Some will accuse you of arrogance. Some will say you've changed. Let them. Because the man who finally acts was once the boy who waited too long. He knows the cost of delay. He knows the price of permission, and he's not paying it anymore. What it feels like. Moving without permission feels like this. You speak, even if your voice shakes. You leave, even when they don't understand. You build, even if no one claps. You say no without explanation. You say yes without consensus. And it feels solid, clean, unshakable. Not because it's easy, but because it's true. You're no longer negotiating with the world about your existence. You've signed the contract with your soul, and now the world can adjust. What they say. They will say, "You're different now. You've become cold. You think you're better than us. You've changed." And you'll nod, because you have. You are no longer an actor in their story. You are writing your own script, and it doesn't need a cosign. Ending. You move, and the world bends. You want to know power? It's not in your fists, not in your wallet, not in your words. It's in your decision. The clean, unflinching decision to move. Without fear, without flattery, without asking. That's the moment the world starts to watch. That's the moment they begin to follow, resist, or fear. Because now they know you're no longer waiting. And in a world of hesitant men, the one who moves first changes everything. But what happens when you're misunderstood? When your silence offends? When your clarity is twisted, your choices are misread? Most men panic, but not this one. Because in the next chain, we meet the man who doesn't fear being misunderstood. He doesn't rush to explain. He lets their confusion rise. Because he is too busy building something they may never understand. Join us in Chain 4. You don't fear being misunderstood. They'll twist your silence. They'll project their fears onto your calm. Let them. They told you, clarify yourself. Make sure they get it. Don't let them misjudge you. And for years you did. You explained every move. You overshared every choice. You tried to fill every silence with justification, until one day, you saw it. Even after you clarified, even after you opened your chest and let them see your heart, they still misunderstood you. And that's when the final switch flipped. You realized that being understood is not the goal. Being whole is. The burden of explaining. Why do most men explain so much? Because they fear rejection. They think, if I can just explain it well enough, they'll accept me. If I show them why I did it, maybe they won't walk away. It's a defense mechanism, a survival script, but it comes from the child in you, the one who needed permission to feel safe. Explaining becomes a way to keep love close. But what if love walks away anyway? What if your clarity still makes them leave? What if your truth, no matter how gently you phrase it, offends? Now you are faced with the question that separates the king from the servant. Would you rather be understood, or would you rather be free? Jung. Projection is their shadow, not yours. Carl Jung warned us, thinking is difficult. That's why most people judge. What they don't understand, they label. What they can't control, they condemn. What triggers their shadow, they attack. And your silence? your direct gaze, your refusal to explain your every step, that threatens their illusion of control. So what do? They project. They say, "He thinks he's better than us. He's arrogant. He doesn't care anymore. He's cold, dangerous, closed off." But none of these are you. They're fragments of them, thrown onto your wall like paint. If you panic, if you explain, if you apologize, you validate the lie. But if you stand still, let them speak, let them guess, let them fear the mystery. You reclaim something greater than understanding. You reclaim sovereignty. Stoicism, the art of indifference to misjudgment. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." He didn't say explain it. He didn't say prove it. He said be it. Because to the Stoic, the opinion of others is a wind. Sometimes it pushes you forward. Sometimes it burns your face. But the disciplined man adjusts his sails and continues. To fear being misunderstood is to worship the crowd, to live in their eyes, to dance in their theater. But when you stop fearing it, you exit the performance. You walk into your own arena and build something real. The man who builds anyway. The man who fears being misunderstood is a hostage. He won't start the business. He won't end the relationship. He won't speak his truth. He won't make the bold move. Because someone, somewhere, might not get it. And so his life becomes a compromise. A half-written poem, a castle built with the crowd's approval. But the man who no longer fears misunderstanding, he builds anyway. Even if no one sees the foundation, even if the scaffolding looks strange, even if they laugh while it's halfway done, he builds. Because he's not building it for them, he's building it for something deeper, for his soul, for the man he becomes when no one's watching. Why they misunderstand you. Because you walked away without explaining. Because you didn't shrink. Because you stopped texting first. Because you said no and didn't justify it. Because you smiled but didn't play along. They can't make sense of it, so they call it arrogance, toxic masculinity, coldness, narcissism. But it's not. It's clarity. It's discipline. It's self-respect. And in a world addicted to overexposure and over-explaining, a man who doesn't justify himself looks like a storm they can't name. Let them. Let them twist your actions. Let them think you're angry. Let them invent their stories. Let them echo the rumors. Because here's the truth. They don't need to understand. And you don't need to explain. You just need to continue. You need to build, to train, to refine, to protect, to love with depth, to lead with calm, to walk away when it's time. They'll catch up later. Or they won't. It doesn't change the path. The untouchable edge. A man who doesn't need to be understood is no longer manipulated. He's not guilt-tripped. He's not baited by false outrage. He doesn't chase closure. Because he knows understanding is optional, but truth is not. When they misunderstand you, that's their story. You're writing a different one. And now you've stopped explaining. You've stopped needing praise. You've started moving without permission. You've stopped fearing misunderstanding. And now there's one more door to guard. Your time. Because what you've built, your mind, your clarity, your inner citadel, will only last if you defend it. And your time is the first gate they'll try to breach. In the next chain, we enter that battle. Chain 5. You guard your time like your life, where we sharpen the final boundary, where you become the master of access, where your silence is no longer a defense, but a fortress. Let's set the boundary of kings. Chain 5. You guard your time like your life. A man who doesn't guard his time has already surrendered his life. They'll ask for it gently. Just 5 minutes. Quick call. Let's hang out. Come through. It sounds harmless, but those 5 minutes, they know how to multiply. Before you realize, you're living in everyone else's urgency, and your own purpose has starved in silence. No army will come for your soul, but they will come for your hours. And if you give them away, piece by piece, your life will be nothing but what others made of it. This is where the untouchable man draws the 5th line. He guards his time like his life, because it is. The thieves are not always obvious. They won't always wear masks. Sometimes they come as friends, sometimes as lovers. Sometimes with smiling faces, small requests, or guilt-laced favors. But what they're really doing is asking for slices of your fire. Not everyone who wants your time deserves it, and not everyone who deserves it deserves all of it. The weak man says yes to avoid discomfort. The untouchable man says no to preserve alignment. Because time is not just minutes on a clock. It is focus, mental real estate, emotional bandwidth, the essence of your presence. Marcus Aurelius. You could be good today, but instead, the emperor knew. You could be good today, but instead, you choose tomorrow. This is the tragedy of the distracted man. He keeps pushing his life to later. He answers every notification. He listens to every complaint. He lets the world carve him into fragments. But the man who sees the truth becomes ruthless with distractions. Not cruel, but clear. He checks the calendar before he says yes. He guards his mornings like sacred ground. He designs his day like a warrior sharpens his sword, because he knows one day becomes your entire life. Jung. Time is the soil where the self grows. Jung did not speak often of time, but he showed it everywhere in his process. Individuation, the journey to wholeness, requires space, depth, silence, energy. If your days are consumed by reaction, you can never hear the voice of your deeper self. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." But awakening requires stillness, and stillness requires time. Not borrowed time, chosen time. The kind you defend, the kind you invest in self, not spend on others' chaos. You cannot become who you were meant to be if your schedule is shaped by those who don't even know who they are. You're not busy, you're scattered. Some will say, "I'm just so busy." But busyness is not power. Busyness is often leakage. You're busy because you've given access to the wrong hands. You've said yes to avoid guilt. You've avoided silence out of fear of yourself. You've equated activity with growth. But true power doesn't panic. True power knows the difference between motion and meaning. The untouchable man doesn't fill every hour. He sharpens them. He cuts time into discipline. He schedules solitude. He leaves blank space for strategy, for rest, for depth. Because he knows, if you don't own your day, someone else will. The power of saying no. No is not rejection. No is protection. Every no is a vote for your purpose. Every time you guard your calendar, every time you protect your energy, every time you block noise before it enters, you say to the world, "I am not here to entertain. I am here to become." They may say you've changed. They may say you're distant. They may call you selfish. Let them. Because when you're no longer accessible to everyone, you become valuable to the few who matter. Your time is your sword, not your phone, not your watch, not your schedule app. Your attention is your real clock. Who gets your full attention? What receives your morning energy? Where does your late-night clarity go? A king does not open his gates at random. He decides who enters, and more importantly, who does not. That's how you become more than a man. That's how you become a presence. Because presence is expensive, and once you learn that, you stop giving it away for free. What are you building? Ask yourself tonight, what would happen if you had 5 uninterrupted hours every day? What would you build? Who would you become? Now ask yourself, where did those 5 hours go today? Into someone's drama? Into scrolls, feeds, alerts, gossip? Into half-hearted conversations with people who don't fuel your soul? You already know the answer. And now you know the solution. Your time is sacred. Treat it like that. Not someday. Now. The silence that follows. You've said no. You've pulled back. You've gone quiet. You've stopped replying. You've guarded your schedule. You've protected your energy, and now there is silence. At first, it's uncomfortable. Then it becomes powerful. And eventually, it becomes necessary. Because in that silence, you finally hear what the world drowned out. Your own voice. The one that doesn't ask for permission, the one that doesn't chase, the one that doesn't explain, the one that doesn't beg to be understood, the one that leads. One final threshold. There's only one more chain. Because even now, even with all your boundaries built, there's one thing that separates the truly untouchable man from the rest. The courage to witness truth without flinching. Not turning away from darkness, not avoiding the mirror, not distracting yourself from the unbearable, facing it, feeling it, holding your gaze. That's what we do next. Chain 6. You don't look away. The end is not silence. The end is what you're finally willing to face within it. Let's step in. Chain 6. You don't look away. The man who no longer flinches rules over himself. There's a moment every man meets if he dares to walk alone. Not a moment of glory, not a moment of applause, but the moment where something dark rises from within and he has nowhere left to hide. Most will look away, distract themselves, call someone, scroll, drink, blame. But a few, they hold the gaze. They don't run. They don't deny. They don't flinch. They look straight into the black mirror, and something changes forever. The final discipline, staring back. You've dropped the mask. You've stopped chasing. You've guarded your time, your energy, your soul. You've pulled away from the noise. And now the final test isn't about others. It's about you. Can you sit with yourself without distraction? Can you face the shadow that still walks behind you? Can you feel the regret, the guilt, the forgotten memories, and not escape? Because that's where sovereignty is forged. Not in grand victories, but in silent reckonings. No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. Carl Jung. If you turn away from the truth, you give it power over you. But if you face it, if you let your eyes stay open, you break the spell. The man who sees everything. You've become a man who sees. You see the game. You see the traps. You see the wounds not only in others but in yourself. You see how you chased validation, how you feared being left, how you avoided responsibility, how you lied to protect your pride. But now, you no longer need denial. The untouchable man is not untouched by pain. He's touched by all of it, but he remains unshaken. Because he has made peace with his history, and he owns his scars like a warrior wears his armor. Stoic gaze, Jungian depth. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining." But Jung showed us why we avoid, because we fear what we might find. Yet the Stoic and the Jungian both agree, your salvation lies in what you refuse to look at. So look at your anger, look at your jealousy, look at the women you chased to avoid emptiness. Look at the father you never forgave. Look at the boy inside you who still weeps. And then, don't try to fix it. Just be with it. Hold, witness, endure. That is the death of false self and the birth of real power. The fire beneath the silence. At first, silence felt like emptiness. Then it became protection. Now it is your furnace. In that stillness, a fire grows. It doesn't scream. It doesn't ask for applause. It just burns. And through that fire, you realize the real war was never outside. The battle was not for control or women or approval. It was always for one thing: mastery of the self. What you become. When you stop looking away, you become calm without needing escape. You become bold without needing permission. You become clear without seeking clarity from others. You become a mirror for everyone who still hides. And people will feel it. Some will be drawn to it, others will fear it. Because most have never met someone who is not afraid to feel, to see, to face, to know. But that's who you are now. You don't look away, so others might begin to see. This is not ego. This is not force. This is presence. And presence is rare. It's earned in fire, hardened in solitude, sharpened in silence. You become the man whose gaze cannot be stolen, whose emotions are not on auction, whose spirit cannot be rented out for validation. You don't explain, you don't chase, you don't ask for approval. You just walk, with your eyes open, with your shadow integrated, with your life finally under your own command. The return is complete. You've walked through fire. You've met the mirror. You've learned the discipline. And now, you're not untouchable because you escaped pain. You're untouchable because you've been through it, and you stayed awake. That's the man who cannot be owned. Not by others, not by systems, not even by his own fears. This is not the end. This is the opening of the gate. The return, not to the world, but to yourself. The ending, or the real beginning. They will ask you what changed. You'll smile, because they won't understand yet. And that's okay. Let them chase, let them flatter, let them gossip, let them scroll, let them beg for certainty. You are past all that. You have returned. Now the real work begins. The work is never over, but now you know the path. So walk it, silently, sovereignly, with your eyes open. If this path speaks to something silent inside you, subscribe. This is not just a series. It's a return to the fire within. We'll meet again.